Efficiency Unlocked is hosted by two tech-savvy physicians and dear friends of mine, Doctors Adam Carewe and Dale Gold, who are experts in using technology to automate routine tasks and increase efficiency in everyday and business life. Let's see what they have for us today.
On the other hand, there's also patients who have symptoms such as some unexplained numbness and tingling. They get the whole body MRI, clean bill of health. Well, it's still persisting, so let me dig deeper. And they finally arrive at a neurologist, they get repeat imaging, and findings are very consistent with multiple sclerosis. And this is perhaps a few months after they got their whole body MRI. And there's no way that some of these findings weren't on the previous scan.
That was Dr. Brian Tsui, neuroradiologist and chief medical officer at CoreViva, bringing cutting-edge tools directly into patient care. Dr. Tsui has authored over 40 publications, presentations, and book chapters on AI and novel MRI techniques. After training at Case Western, UCLA, and UCSF, and serving on the faculty at UCSF, he now fuses advanced technology with frontline clinical experience to transform radiology into a practical force for better outcomes.
Yeah, in multiple ways, right? We can get to each area of the body faster, so that's one component. We can make sure we increase accuracy. Like I mentioned before, the AI is an extra pair of eyes for us because it can lesion detect, the AI that we built. And then we can also improve the diagnostic information on the back end. So our AI also helps with our reporting structure. So just from scan to interpretation to report, we're using AI at each level that we built.
And that was Dr. Alan Alexander, physician executive, radiologist, and CEO at CoreViva, who has guided elite athletes for the Lakers and Dodgers and crafted global strategies at McKinsey & Company. With over 75 publications spanning cancer research, AI applications, and the landmark trial showing caloric restriction boosts lifespan, he's trained at MD Anderson, George Washington, Cleveland Clinic, and UCLA. An avid surfer who lives the healthy lifestyle he studies, Dr. Alexander is uniquely poised to show us how early detection and innovation can make lasting impact. Welcome Drs. Alan Alexander and Brian Tsui to the show. Let's dive in. Before we jump into the interview, I want to be as fully transparent as possible. I've personally invested my money in this company at an early stage because I believe they're onto something. I encourage you to listen to the entire episode, even if the notion of whole body MRI makes you uncomfortable. And with that, let's get on to the show. All right, welcome to this week's episode of NerdMD's Efficiency Unlocked. Happy to have the guests we just introduced join us today for a company that's near and dear personally to me as well. So welcome, Alan and Brian, to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
You bet. And Dale's here today too, as well. And we're going to kick it off. So, I mean, obviously we just heard this intro about you guys, but, you guys both have like kind of an impressive and kind of a unconventional, I would say, path as, physician entrepreneurs, ranging from pro sport team experience to being at McKinsey for a long time, to, being deep at UCSF and different AI research around radiology. So, I guess, Alan, why did you kick this off? But like, what personally drew you to kind of like the intersection of radiology, innovation, and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so radiology is a very visual field, right? And I'm a very visual learner, so I think seeing things for me it's natural. I love solving problems. I've always loved solving problems. So I think with radiology, what you're doing is you're looking at a patient, you're looking at the inside of a patient, and you're really trying to solve the problems that they have. Radiology also has a lot of innovation, like you mentioned. It's always on the cutting edge of technology compared to a lot of the other healthcare specialties. And so, you need the technology. You need to have advanced technology to keep re-innovating to be ahead of the game in radiology. From an entrepreneurial side, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. A lot of people in my family have started their own businesses. It is a lot of work, but I feel it's worthwhile to build something meaningful that can help a large population. One of the reasons that I was at McKinsey for so many years was that you could help companies with these large innovative ideas and bring in ideas to them, which drive impact for millions of patients. And frankly, I get angry when I see things that are not being done right that are not being done in the patient-centric way. And in this case, there's an opportunity to team up with someone I really respect in the field and is a friend of mine, Dr. Brian Tsui, to do the right thing for patients. And that's what kind of brought all this together at the intersection.
Awesome. Yeah, Brian, can you kind of answer that too? How obviously you guys met at some point along this journey, but yeah, tell us a little bit about how you arrived at this spot too.
Yeah, similar to Alan, I think one of the things that drew me to radiology was because of its innovation. There's so much technology to go around. I remember when I was a medical student, radiology, you always have this fancy equipment. There's a lot of technology to go around. It's a relatively young specialty, and there's so much that has changed over the years, where initially you were doing x-rays, but now you have MRI and even other new and up and coming modalities. And it feels like everything is coming along. And that's one thing I really love about radiology. Now, naturally, when a new subfield of radiology, whole body MRI, came along, and there's a lot of opportunities to innovate, I was naturally drawn to it. And after doing a lot of research and figuring out what was in the space and how to do it, I soon realized really the only way to do it right for patients was to start my own company and pave my own path. And I'm lucky to know people who have that kind of shared vision in Dr. Alan Alexander, who I met along my journey, and make sure that we're starting a company that does things the right way for patients.
Yeah, I think that's great to find that. Is there a specific patient case or personal experience for either one of you that kind of more specifically within radiology sparked the passion for early detection and, really thinking about the AI-driven diagnostics?
Yeah, thinking about kind of some of the people I know. So personally, there's a couple people I know who've unfortunately had cancer at a very young age. One of them is someone I know. They recently been diagnosed with lung cancer in their 30s. And it's really puts a halt on your life, about to start their career, want to expand their family. But now, things have changed because of that diagnosis. Another person I know was diagnosed by breast cancer, advanced stage breast cancer in their 30s as well. So they essentially became symptomatic and went through the diagnostic workup. So before even screening is offered at that age. Aside from cancer, there's a family friend, they're a neighbor of my parents, and their daughter actually passed away from subarachnoid hemorrhage after an aneurysm ruptured in her brain. And so, along with these kind of more personal experiences and my experience as a radiologist, seeing young patients with colon cancer that's now metastasized to liver, or gastric cancer that, now on G-tube and, having to go on big surgeries. I know there has to be a better way to screen for cancer and other diseases before people pass away while just really starting out their adult life. On the AI side, one of my first things I think is very common for people is they first saw or first used ChatGPT and was really impressed with some of the output. I was really impressed by some of its ability to, search things, you kind of play around with it. But, I think there's a lot of things you can do to automate tedious tasks. Now, I don't think that you want to automate all the tedious tasks, because I know that it can be very frustrating for people to sometimes chat with chat boxes that are AI. They're kind of just giving you the runaround and giving you the same answer and over again, when ultimately you just need a human to step in. But I think there's a lot of things like in the radiology realm, such as protocoling and other tedious things where it's very labor intensive for humans, but it's very algorithm driven, that I feel like can really play a role in making things more efficient and run things smoother.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, obviously very serious topic and very personal to many. And, hopefully, as to your point, AI can kind of open up some of those opportunities. Alan, anything you want to add to any personal stories on why this is personal to you?
Yeah, thanks, Dale. I think just as a physician, we're seeing more and more. So from the early detection side, we're seeing more and more patients at earlier ages get cancer. And I have a lot of. We can dive into the theories I have for that, but there are some probable reasons for that. But it's happening regardless, and so there needs to be better early detection. From the AI side, I think AI is an excellent tool to augment any radiologist when done the right way, and that's the key, right? When done the right way, it serves as an extra pair of eyes, essentially. And I've always been interested, like I mentioned before, in cutting edge innovations. And me and our other co-founder, Adam Zhang, actually wrote a paper about this at McKinsey, and it ended up becoming a seminal paper around AI in medical imaging. It was kind of ahead of its time in the Journal of American College of Radiology. So, I've been interested in this from the forefront, and I think it's a great tool to have. We talked to a lot of radiologists say, "Oh, older school," the thought was, "Oh, it's going to replace us," but I think no, the newer school is realizing if it's done the right way, it can augment us and actually make us more accurate and reduce false positives and really help patients.
Yeah, thanks, you guys. I mean, that we always love to start the show with like personal kind of connection to it, because I think that that's why we all start something, right? I mean, that's why we all got into medicine, probably the first place. Why our career path goes the way it does. You're kind of you should be following these passions. And let's shift a bit to like more about CoreViva itself, and why did you guys decide to start it now? And I guess you can explain too at what state, kind of CoreViva's in right now. And then, you've alluded to this, both of you, throughout your personal reflection on starting this, but, what are the initial problems you're looking to solve, and maybe some of those like future problems that you're hoping to solve as a part of the company as well?
So CoreViva, it fundamentally is a health and wellness company. And the way we're doing this around is providing whole body MRIs. We're dedicated to helping patients increase their health span and their lifespan. The reason why we started CoreViva is that we think that there are a few problems currently in this space. So there's a leadership issue. The companies in this space currently are not run by physicians, and they don't understand what patients need and how to effectively deliver healthcare. There's also a quality issue. There's a lot of variability in the interpretation, differences in image quality. There's a lot of bad image quality on the images, and this leads to uncertainty in the radiologist's interpretation. And when there is uncertainty in the radiologist's interpretation, then you have to repeat the imaging. And that's not what patients want to undergo. And finally, there's a follow-up issue in this space. When there's a serious finding, patients either sometimes don't understand the magnitude of that finding because they don't understand the report because it's currently in medical jargon, or they frankly just don't know where they need to go to. To combat this, we've made sure that our report is readable and understandable to all patients, not just physicians, because this report needs to be understood by everyone. And we also offer a complimentary radiologist consultation to make sure it's clear to everybody of the magnitude of what's going on into their body, and to lead them to the next steps on how to address that and get them to the next place if necessary.
Yeah, I think Adam, at the time, this was a few years ago, professional athletes that I was working with were asking me about whole body scans, and I wasn't aware of a lot that was going on. If you think about 10 years ago or so, whole body CTs were very popular. Obviously, that's too much radiation, and that's just out of balance with the data that we have today. But I started looking deeper into the whole body MRI field as I was learning about this, and like I said, Brian's a trusted colleague and a friend, so I called him up and asked him about it. I said, "Look, what do you know about whole body MRIs?" And then he told me.
So I was seeing a lot of follow-ups for whole body MRIs for patients who were told that they had some sort of abnormality, and reading their follow-ups. And I was seeing indications such as aneurysm detected on whole body MRI, and there's obviously a lot of anxiety that goes around that when you're told you have a brain aneurysm. And so you go to get worked up and I'm reading their scan and there's no aneurysm. And a very similar thing for another patient who were told they had an indeterminate brain mass on whole body screening, and they're getting worked up for possible surgery, and turns out there's no brain mass, there's no need for surgery. And so patients are getting a lot of unnecessary anxiety for a lot of these false positives. On the other hand, there's also patients who have symptoms such as some unexplained numbness and tingling. They get the whole body MRI, clean bill of health. Well, it's still persisting, so let me dig deeper. And they finally arrive at a neurologist. They get repeat imaging, and findings are very consistent with multiple sclerosis. And this is perhaps a few months after they got their whole body MRI. And there's no way that some of these findings weren't on the previous scan. And so I think these examples highlight to me about the importance of making sure that the image quality is good so we can see the important finding, and making sure that we're able to interpret and characterize the findings accurately so we reduce false positives and also false negatives, because that's what patients deserve.
So, what makes CoreViva's approach to whole body MRI different from what's already out there? And, I'll add into that. Obviously, you two are experts and specialists in this field. And even myself, a physician who's not a radiologist, some of this is new to me. But, you're kind of alluding to some of the quality issues and some of the pieces that are problems in sort of the background state. Can you give us a sense and give the audience a sense of what those problems are and how you're addressing those and what your vision is?
Yeah, no, thanks, Dale. That's a really good question. So I think that's what ultimately brought us together, because as we discussed the issues in the space, and I had to tell the professional athletes, hold off, right? Doesn't seem like there's a good solution right now. Probably still in the early stages. But the more and more Brian and I spoke about this and discussed this, the more we realized there's a demand and people are wanting this, but there's not a great solution that we're comfortable with, right? I wouldn't send my family to what existed at that point. And so we thought, well, we could probably do this better than anybody else. So why don't we just put our heads together and just do this the right way? And again, it goes back to when I see something being done that's not the most patient-centric, it frankly pisses me off. And so, I think it's time to, if I have the ability to do something to fix that, I'm going to do it. And so, we got together, and the three of us got together and just, went at it. And to fast forward to now, you asked, what makes us different? We have the fastest, most accurate, most comprehensive scan for whole body imaging, hands down. We're very proud of what we built, and I think it's awesome. We look in detail at from head to toe, and I can let Brian speak to some of this stuff because he helped build a lot of this stuff. But we're very proud of what we have, and I think we're finally doing this the right way. We're excited to bring it to patients.
So to make our scan the fastest in a market, we've worked really hard on the protocol, making sure that we're scanning everything we need, but moving around the complex parameters and making sure we use AI to ensure that the patient doesn't need to stay on the table that long and they can get off the table as fast as they can. We're most accurate because we've made sure that image quality is paramount. We have top-notch image quality that allows our interpreting radiologists to make a confident diagnosis. So you don't have to get a patient to repeat that examination or have a report that is hedgy, that there may or may not be an abnormality, but I'm not sure. So get a repeat examination. I think that's terrible for both the patient and the physician who receives that report. And we're most comprehensive by having evaluation of the brain, the musculoskeletal system, and all the organs in greater detail than anything out there. We're, again, able to do that in half the time. And we have the radiologist consultation and follow-up as a way to make sure that patients really understand what's going on in their body. They're able to go through the images, understand that, and then also being able to follow up and get the care they need if necessary.
And if it's cutting it down in half the time, just for my sake, what is the original time and what is your times, just for listeners to understand?
What we've seen on the market is typically an hour or more. our scan time is about 35 minutes. And, if you, in our next conversation a year from now, I guarantee you'll be even faster than that, because we're constantly working on parameters to make it faster and faster. And we have ways to do that. My goal is to get it well under half an hour.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sitting still for an hour. Who has that kind of time?
Yeah. Not me.
Yeah. No, and it's like, I obviously I know you guys as well, but I think like, when I hear like Brian, like you summarize, what this is, like, again, as like a primary care physician, I'm used to ordering different types of MRIs and different types of studies. And, it's like typically, we always have to really specify what we're looking for, kind of like what, our differential is, to obviously help you guys both, I think, determine the type of protocol. Is that the right term? I think that would be used, and then also helps you clinically, obviously, with the information. I guess like, I don't know. This really isn't a question. It's more just an observation. It sounds like what you're talking about is kind of this arrival at almost like the Holy Grail, right? Like it's an imaging kind of protocol and quality that is extremely good at capturing a wide net of things. So it has that really big sensitivity, right? But then you're also saying it's pretty specific too. And like, it will actually have enough kind of image quality that the radiologist will be able to make kind of a more definitive thing. Because I'll tell you, you mentioned this earlier. As ordering physicians, I hate the radiology hedges. Like, it's like horrible. Like, because I'm like lost if I don't, if I tell the patient, well, the radiologist, thanks, maybe. But so, am I right in like kind of summarizing that? Like that's really what that you've achieved, and then that you're continuing to work towards.
Well, you said something that was really interesting, and I appreciate. You said CoreViva is the Holy Grail. I want to put your face on the billboard and write that next to it. CoreViva, the bubble to your CoreViva is the Holy Grail. I love that. Look, if that's the way we're seen, I feel blessed. But that's our goal. Our goal is to do this the best way, and that's what that's part of our mission. We just want to do this the right way and the best way for patients.
So where are you guys right now? Like as a kind of like as a company status, can you give a sense to the listeners?
Patients can sign up now. Patients can sign up now for scans and schedule their scans. We're already scheduling scans and getting people in. So, excited to help serve patients. Go to our site, CoreViva.com, and we can finally, the technology that we've been working on for a while, we can finally bring to patients and help save a bunch of lives, help find abnormalities before they get catastrophic, but also help give people peace of mind. I'm very excited about that.
No, awesome. So like, I think what we like to pivot in, like kind of the second half of this is we like to kind of go, obviously Dale and I are kind of technologists, informaticists. We like to look at like some of the details. We don't want you guys to spill any beans that you don't want to spill. But, I guess kind of a first question, like, we've asked this in one way, shape or form about like kind of what makes you guys different. But is there anything else that you guys could share that's, kind of under the hood where you would say this is like a differentiator?
One thing, besides our scan speed, the speed of our scan, besides the comprehensiveness that's unique, and the quality, I think us leveraging AI to ensure that we can so we use AI in multiple ways, right? We can get to each area of the body faster. So that's one component. We can make sure we increase accuracy. Like I mentioned before, the AI is an extra pair of eyes for us because it can lesion detect, the AI that we built. And then we can also improve the diagnostic information on the back end. So our AI also helps with our reporting structure. So just from scan to interpretation to report, we're using AI at each level that we've built. I think that's a differentiator in a sense, because I don't think others are using that, or if they are, they're not using it the right way. So I think we're unique in that sense. And again, it just helps us with accuracy, and it helps us with efficiency, and it helps us with just getting accurate reports. And back to Brian's point, we're not hedging, right? If we see something, this is what it is. If it's benign, it's benign. If it's malignant, it's malignant. If it's malignant, go take care of it. We'll help you. If it's benign, leave it alone. Don't think about it twice. Instead of, I don't know what this is, and what do I do here? And that relieves the burden from a lot of family practitioners like yourselves too, because I'm sure that you're inundated with questions of, I got this cyst in my kidney and what do I do? Am I going to die? Let us talk to the patients about that and let us reassure them this is negative. Let's focus on the things that are positive. And those are things that we need to talk to your physician about. So that's our goal. I think that's what differentiates us. Brian can go into more depth about the AI as well.
In addition to kind of some of the examples Alan's talked about, we're also able to provide information on things that were previously perhaps thought to be too tedious to obtain, such as the amount of visceral fats in your body versus the subcutaneous fat, the muscle volume that you have to evaluate for sarcopenia. Since previously a radiologist would have to manually segment each slice, and takes a lot of work and a lot of time. But now AI is able to do that very quickly, generate a number, and you make sure that it's done it correctly, but generally it does a very good job of it, and you're able to report that number and give that information, which I think a lot of physicians really want that information. And just to move from the technology side, on the operations side, we also have developed a proprietary way to allow us to freely communicate between CoreViva and then also our referring physicians and patients. So there's seamless communication between both ways. If there is ever a question about a finding or what to do next, it doesn't take a month or 2 months to have a radiologist come back to you. You can get the answer either the same day or the next day.
And obviously you mentioned in the space of the AI that you're making, and there sounds to be some sort of custom nature to that. I'm just curious, is a lot of this automating some of those tasks that you two would typically do and kind of finding ways to have AI replace those, or is this a totally separate type invention that you're working on?
I would say both. So for example, Ryan mentioned, you'd have to manually measure visceral fat versus, muscle, et cetera. I think there's that piece, and then there's a piece so that's the automation piece. And then there's the augmentation piece where it helps us lesion detect, it helps us lesion characterize. So you get a second pair of eyes. I will say, going back to your question, I think it's important to emphasize another thing that makes us unique is that every patient, again, the number one concern, at least for me, would be, because I jumped in the scanner, I got a whole body scan, is, do you have cancer, right? That's like the biggest fear, right? Do we have cancer? But then there's other pieces. Do I have aneurysms? Do I have fatty liver disease? There's a lot of other pieces. How's my musculoskeletal health? I think musculoskeletal health was overlooked a lot. And that's very important for, the more mobile you are, the more longevity. There's obviously a lot of data behind that. The less mobile, the less longevity. So I think that's really important. And so we developed a CoreViva score for patients. And part of that scoring system is we give you a brain age, we give you a musculoskeletal grade or age, and then we give you a visceral fat score. And I think those three components are important. People know where am I in this spectrum? Am I physically younger than I am, or am I physically a lot older than I am? And I think it's important to know where people, because it's not just, okay, you have a score. There's actually actionable things you can do about that score to improve or to sustain. And I think that's really important for people.
No, that's great. I mean, and you guys see, I hope you guys see customers potentially doing these on some sort of regular cadence, right? I mean, assuming that, say, it's normal, but they get these scores, and kind of the health and wellness crowd wants to, see if their interventions over the last year have made these changes. And so you guys see that as being a part of this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, my wife who's a physician, I spoke to this at length. Brian and I have spoken this at length. What's the right cadence? And initially our hypothesis was, maybe every few years, but then we started seeing cancers in some of our pilot patients. We said, well, this could have shown up, a month ago or a couple months ago or 6 months ago. I think, unfortunately, some of the most lethal cancers are aggressive, and you can't wait X amount of years for it, right? So I'm going to get a scan every year. My wife's going to get a scan every year. I put my money where my mouth is. I would advise everybody to get a scan every year just to make sure that we can catch things early. Ovarian, pancreatic, other aggressive diseases that if you catch early, you have better, much higher, or much better outcomes, much higher chance of survival versus if you catch it too late. So I think it's a yearly thing. And ultimately the goal would be to just institute this in part of the health and wellness preventative measures that people take, that everybody takes, right? Just should be part of the physical exam, I think. we're not a shop where you just come in and get an MRI, right? You're our patient, we take care of you. We'll work with your physicians to take care of you.
Yeah, I think that ties into what you said earlier about, having the physician run influence, because, clearly thinking about the full patient journey is so important, and, so important to us as a patient, that someone's going to take us from that beginning to end. And obviously as a primary care physician, that, not just have this dropped off of my desk, but, the service is being provided from start to finish. So that's cool.
Yeah. I think to your point with the physician leadership, we're also physician backed. So, we turned down institutional money and VC money because we wanted to do this organically with a physician lens, patient-centric. So, we have over 20 investors that are majority physicians. And, we're very proud of that. We're very proud of being physician-backed, physician-led. We have a really robust physician advisory board as well, from all walks of specialties, right, ranging from family practice to orthopedic surgery, emergency medicine, et cetera. A lot of specialties covered in that, to have that voice, right, to have that patient's voice, so we can do things the right way. I know somebody that's really good that's on that advisory board as well, that's on this call.
Yeah. I mean, good question for Adam. This is something that Adam brought to me as something that he was really interested in. And we obviously see lots of emerging tech, and it's not every day he does that. Adam, what kind of brought you to this company and got your attention? And, what have you learned as you've learned more?
Yeah, no, good question. And I think, it was very interesting because when I first met Alan, like just through a Slack that we're both in on, I had recently listened to a podcast, with one of the companies of another whole body MRI. And I just remember listening to that, and like, it's like my evidence-based kind of mindset. I was kind of irritated when I heard it, and like the way the person was answering, the person that was on it was not a clinician. And just I came away with that, like being kind of irritated. Then, fast forward to when I met Alan and, we started chatting, it's like, it came to like all of the things that you worry about like kind of, testing people for lots of things, so like, even take like ordering a bunch of labs on someone, it's like in the back of my mind as an evidence-based physician, I like, you worry about that unless there's something really good that can be followed up from it, and like, and again, I think like all those concerns I had of like, too many false positives, too many incidentalomas, and obviously false negatives, which you really don't want. I thought like, and this like whole like, approach of like physician backed, physician led, patient experience being kind of that North Star. I mean, those are the types of things that I can get behind, while also, it's okay to be a little uncomfortable about some of these new companies, that are doing things different than the norm. And I think a lot of times it's, someone has to push the envelope, right? Like, we wouldn't have a lot of the stuff we have in life today if there wasn't someone that really pushed it, and we don't have to talk about anybody currently in the news that obviously pushed things with several companies, but like, it's like, I think you got to push those things. And again, if you do it the right way and you try to mitigate as much of that kind of negative downfall risk around it, I think eventually these types of technologies, like Alan said, are going to be, they're going to be mainstream, and we'll look at it today and go, why weren't we doing this, a long time ago? Again, once we have the data to like, I think I truly support it too. I mean, that's going to be, I think that's going to be the challenge to get everybody on board with these types of things. It's like anything new, there's like that adoption curve, Dale, like we always talk about. Like there'll be the early adopters. There's the ones that are already out there front in line. And then there's, there's that big group in the middle. And then there's like the laggards, that aren't going to come until the very end. But,
yeah, no, I think it's well said. And I think, the fact that, physicians doing this for us and designing how that is versus letting it happen to the field, to your point, it probably is happening anyway, versus it's better for you two at the helm, figuring out what that looks like and how that's going to work with physicians to sort of augment what they're doing and sort of augment primary care and have it fit into the system, makes sense. So yeah, it makes sense for that to be the bleeding edge. And No, I appreciate you, Adam, sharing all that. Speaking of the data, can you guys share anything? We love to go here to understand for those of our detail listened audience of what success have you had? What are the numbers? Anything you could share?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously to test our protocols and to develop what we developed, we had to scan patients, right? And so there was roughly a little bit more than 100 patients that we scanned, and about 10% of those had some serious findings or life-threatening findings, which I thought was significant. That's actually what made me jump in the scanner. I didn't expect numbers that high. And I said, okay, these are all healthy individual volunteers. We didn't seek sick patients, right? We just sought patients that were willing to deal with us in the scanner for a while because as we're tweaking protocols. And in the early days, it wasn't 30 minutes. It was longer, right? So, patients that were willing to deal with that. So 10% is high, right? I think if you can find something, but we saved some lives by doing that. And I think that's what's exciting for us, right? We were able to save lives early on, and we were just in a test phase. So just imagine what we're going to be able to do once we go live. And to reemphasize, it's not just about finding cancer. I mean, that's important, but it's also about finding, the brain aneurysm that can burst and kill you. It's about finding fatty liver disease before it gets too aggressive. It's about finding musculoskeletal health problems before they become real problems and you start feeling it. So there's a lot of pieces where we can find and help patients really live the best life they can if we can identify things early.
Yeah, I mean, we've woven in so many of the questions I think that Dale and I were intending to ask, but I guess one I'd love for you guys to expand upon is who do you, and Alan, you can't say everyone, I'm going to preface that with this, but who do you see as the main kind of customers for this, or maybe the ideal ones?
So it's not everyone. It's not everyone. It's every adult.
Okay.
Pediatrics. We don't do pediatrics. So it's every adult. Every adult, right? I think every patient can benefit somehow from this. If you tell me that I have really early fatty liver disease, watch what I eat. That's helpful. I may not know that. If you tell me that my visceral fat is a lot, I'm pretty lean, but my visceral fat is a lot higher than I expected. Okay, maybe I should cut out some of those fats. It's all the data that we get. There's so much data from the head to toe, right? And that can help everybody can potentially benefit from knowing. Or simply you're a perfect specimen, and everything is awesome, right? And your brain and your body is younger than your biological age. That's helpful too, because you just keep doing what you're doing. So I think there's different ways to look at it, but I think it's helpful for everybody. Every adult, not everybody, every adult.
Did you see any difference in your data with different age stratification? As you got older, was the ratio higher? Is there a certain age where someone should think about it more?
So because we only scanned 100 patients, and most of the patients I think fell into the between mid 30s to mid 50s crowd of the patients that we scanned. So just statistically, most of the findings were in that crowd. What's interesting is the cancer burden is shifting to earlier ages, and so I think my hypothesis is that if we scan enough patients and we see that, we're unfortunately going to see a lot more disease burden in earlier ages than we would expect. Cancer used to be an old person's disease, just 20 years ago. It's becoming a younger person's disease, and I think that's what's going to be true. But at the same time, if we can catch it early, we can save lives.
Yeah. And I have nothing against population health, traditionally the way we've done it. But I think the challenge with it is it's a lagging type of guideline, right? It takes a long time. And to your point, obviously colon cancer screening was changed from 50 to 45. And, that was based on data, but when could we have maybe seen that, at an early, we probably really saw that probably 10, 20 years ago, but it's finally. And so I guess that's, I don't know, I guess that's the quest of this more precision, medicine future. I always look at I'm not a huge science fiction person, but in the sci-fi shows, they always had Star Trek. They had that little scanner, right? They just go bloop, 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 and you'd be you're fine. You have this. And it sounds hilarious, but those types of things are what ultimately become reality, and is this the first, little hand scanner, that eventually, everyone will just get, as they pass through, some part of life.
Brian may be working on that as the next part of CoreViva, just FYI.
So Brian and Alan, I'm just going to ping pong some like fun questions for you. This is what we call our Nerd Alert lightning round. So you can, they're not necessarily nerdy. Some of them are, but they're more fun. So first one for you, Alan. If you could have dinner with any person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh man, just any person. First and foremost, my family. I think, I know it's not one person, but it's just, I really cherish those times. I'm on a lot of calls every day. I'm on a lot of meetings every day. Sometimes I have to be late for dinner, and by that time everybody's eating, and that makes me sad. Anytime I can have dinner with my family, I really cherish those moments. I think that's the most important thing. Second person would probably be my grandfather, because he passed away when I was really young. So I'd love to just, a lot of questions I'd have for him that I never got to ask because I was such a young age.
There's been a few guests that have asked, like they reversed the question and asked myself or Dale, and someone asked me that, and I actually answered just the way you did. It was my grandfather, because I think he just, he passed away when I was in med school, and but yeah, it's the same sort of thing. It's like now there's so many things I would love to chat with him about, just being a businessman and kind of everything that he did during his life. No, I think that's a great answer. Brian, do you have someone that, or some person that you'd like to share with that one?
Yeah, I think I'd love to have a meal with Albert Einstein. I think he's a very pivotal person in field of science. I think he did a lot of development. I'd love to hear about things that he was thinking about. I'm sure there's a lot of things he was thinking about that weren't even published or even thought of. He didn't really have the time to kind of write that down and leave it for all of us, and would love to hear kind of how he thought and how he approached science and how he also kind of thinks through things, because I think that would be, it's just so many things he came up with. There must be a system of thought, and I'd love to kind of hear about that.
Yeah, no, super cool. All right, so Brian, have you watched TV shows throughout your life? I need to ask you that question first. Like, did you watch TV shows as a kid, like sitcoms, or?
I watched a couple. I wouldn't say I was like a heavy TV watcher though. Was
there any like TV show, either like past or even present, that you would love to like be on? Not necessarily as a character, but like, or as an actor, but like in the show itself.
No, you may not count this as a show, but I would have. I think I will, especially like 10 years younger than me. I think I would have killed to be on Jeopardy. I love. I actually used to play a lot of these quiz bowl competitions as in a high school and college. And, I think it would have been so fun to be on television and actually be on Jeopardy. And, even if I didn't win, just that experience, I think would have been so cool.
That's great. We watched the Pop Culture Jeopardy, like with our family. Like my kids love that on, I think it's on Amazon.
What's your answer to that, Adam? The show you want to be on? For
me?
Yeah.
Dude, I had like so many shows that I loved as a kid. If I go really young, like I loved Duke and Chips.
Oh,
wow. Those were like the two shows. Like I was like infatuated. And then I guess like one that I had like watched with my mom and dad, and was like MacGyver. I loved that. Like just figuring out how to get out of trouble with like, whatever was in his pocket.
So my answer to this question would be, I know I wasn't asked, but I love the show. I still watch reruns of the show once in a blue moon. Three's Company.
Oh yeah.
Because that set looked like they had an amazing time, right? Like it just seemed fun. It just seemed like they were laughing. They just seemed really engaged and laughing, and it seemed like an amazing time. I would have loved to be on that show.
Yeah. So you can kind of tell like the age of each of us based on how we just answered those, because everyone that was born after 2000 is like, what are you guys talking about?
What is that? I should go look up the reruns. We'll have a good laugh. It's a fantastic show.
Awesome. So I guess, I like asking this to a lot of people. We actually ask this question a lot, but like, and both of you guys can answer and whoever can go first, but like, do you guys each have like a skill that you still would like to like master, or something that you'd like to still learn? Obviously you got a lot on your plate right now, but you guys both have a lot of life to live too.
Yeah, I can go first. I've always liked music, and I, recently kind of got into, watching some people play a violin. And I think it's so inspiring, what people can do with such a small instrument and play such complicated music. And there's some really beautiful pieces, but I think they're very complex to play. If I had the time, I would love to, I used to play piano, and so I know how to read music, and but to kind of learn that dexterity and that skill, I think that would be something I'd love to do.
What about you, Alan?
Well, so master, if I could, and you probably know this about, I surf and I love surfing. If I could be a master, I think, I guess some people would say I'm pretty good, but if I could be a master at surfing, that'd be awesome. But as I get older and I get injured more easily, it's like a less likelihood of that. But I love it. And then the other piece is, my daughter's in jiu-jitsu, and we practice moves on each other. And it just when we were young, jiu-jitsu wasn't around; it wasn't a thing. I actually did Tang Sudo and did it for many years. But if I could, if jiu-jitsu existed, I would. It's just so much more practical, and I love it. So I practice moves with her and stuff because I go to her classes and I see what they're doing, then I do it with her. She actually gave me a bloody nose a few weeks ago. And she's only 4, so that tells you her strength. But it's fun. It's a lot of fun, right? And so I don't know. Maybe if I can get better, just keep practicing with her and see where it goes. But I think that's a lot of fun.
Awesome. No, it's great. Thank you guys both for being on the show. Dale and I obviously appreciate it, and we always let the guest, if there's any sort of closing word they wanted to say that they feel like they didn't get in, I'll let you guys have the final word if you have one.
Our tagline is know your body, and I think that really is what it comes down to. Know your body. Do yourself a favor. Know your body.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. Have a good day.
Thanks Adam. Appreciate it. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to Efficiency Unlocked, Nerd Tested, MD Approved, a Nerd MD's podcast by Drs. Adam Carewe and Dale Gold.